I am Alice. I'm a divorced mom of 2 boys, ages 10 and 7. They live with me full time. Due to the birth of our second child, daycare costs exceeded what my salary was, so I quit my job to become a stay-at-home mom. When the divorce occurred, that created an extreme hardship. I had to start putting a lot of bills on credit cards. It wasn't a path I wanted to go down, but I had no choice. So even though I have this full-time career, it's still a struggle. It's still hard to make ends meet. You can't keep a family of 3 afloat on my salary alone. If we don't discuss this and we don't talk about it and we don't raise the awareness, it's never going to change.
Putting bills on credit cards, working but unable to afford the basics, daycare costs exceeding her salary, having a career but still unable to make ends meet. These are all parts of Charlene's story, but unfortunately, Charlene's story is not unique. Her story may actually sound familiar to that of somebody that you know. That could be a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, or possibly even a relative. Someone who works hard, someone who pays their bills and does everything right. But if their car breaks down, or their child gets sick, or if their hours get cut at work, everything can fall apart. That person is who we call ALICE. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. It describes people who are working, sometimes even more than one job, but who still struggle to afford the basics of living. In Sedgwick County, approximately 40% of households live under what we call the A.L.I.C.E threshold. These families live paycheck to paycheck. They earn too much to qualify for traditional public assistance, but not enough to cover the true cost of living within our community. So ultimately, even though they're employed, they are constantly one flat tire or one unexpected medical bill away from a crisis. To understand what that actually means, let's briefly look at something called the household survival budget before we move into our panel discussion. The household survival budget outlines the bare minimum cost of living in today's economy in Sedgwick County, what it actually takes for a family to simply get by here. It includes only the essentials, so that is housing, healthcare, childcare, food, transportation, and very modest allowances for technology and taxes. According to the 2025 United for Alice report, a family of 4 here in Sedgwick County would need to earn about $75,000 a year just to cover those basics. And remember, that's not to save, that's not to get ahead, that's simply just to survive. However, it's important for us to note what's not included in this household survival budget. That doesn't include school supplies, field trips, or after-school enrichment activities for your kids. That doesn't include saving for retirement. That doesn't include Christmas gifts, vacations, or even winter coats. One of the biggest and fastest rising costs within the household survival budget is actually childcare, which probably comes as no surprise. Since 1990, the cost of childcare has risen 214%, outpacing both wages and inflation. For families in Sedgwick County, childcare on average now exceeds your housing cost. The math simply doesn't work for many working parents, especially those in essential roles that keep our communities running smoothly. That's your childcare providers, your home health aides, your cashiers, the delivery driver that comes to your house and drops off your Amazon package, your home health aides, and customer service representatives as well, most of whom earn far less than what the survival budget requires. When families live under that kind of constant financial pressure, it affects every part of their life. Parents are forced to make impossible choices, such as having to choose between paying their rent and buying groceries, deciding if they're able to actually take off time when their child gets sick, or having to decide if they can afford to take a promotion if it means putting their child care assistance at risk. Those trade-offs take a major toll on families who feel the ripple effects of financial stress every single day. And I know what that feels like because in the early years of my life, I grew up in an A.L.I.C.E household as well. But this story is not just about struggle. It's also a story about strength, about families who show up day after day, doing everything they can to keep things going, even when the math doesn't math. When we support A.L.I.C.E families, whether it's through better childcare options, fair wages, or community programs that help to bridge the gap, we're not just helping individuals. We're helping build a stronger, more stable community for all of us. So, as we move into today's panel, I would invite you to listen with that in mind. Think about the women and families that you know who might be under that A.L.I.C.E threshold and what it might take to help them not just survive, but truly to thrive. So now that we have an idea of what A.L.I.C.E is, it's time for us to segue into our panel discussion. Sarah, I'm going to start with you for the first question. Can you tell us a little bit more about who these A.L.I.C.E households are?
Morning, everybody. I like that Logan started with that these are our essential workers in our economy, you know, the childcare worker, the nursing assistant, because what the research is really telling us is that a lot of the folks that are falling under the A.L.I.C.E threshold are people who are filling these critical needs in our economy and our daily lives. It's of the 20 most commonly held occupations in the state of Kansas, about 14 of them make less than $20 an hour. So if $20 an hour is about $40,000 a year, you can thinking about that household survival budget that Logan took us through, you can pretty quickly see where those dollars are getting eaten up. And so I'm sure it won't surprise you to hear that of the folks holding those 20 most common jobs in the state, 29% of them aren't making ends meet. When you start breaking things down into like some of that household data, the demographic data, you can see some pretty concerning trends. 64% of our young adult households in Sedgwick County are falling under the A.L.I.C.E threshold. Here's one. 79% of single moms in Sedgwick County. I would imagine that a childcare deal is a pretty big part of that. 46% of our elders are falling under the A.L.I.C.E threshold in Sedgwick County, and that's our fastest growing segment of the A.L.I.C.E population. One thing that always comes up though when I have these conversations about A.L.I.C.E, the statistics are important, but they sometimes take a side role because what really takes center stage is that connection that I think a lot of us feel to this information as we start to hear more and learn more. We start to recognize those folks. That's a friend of mine. Like, that's my sister. That used to be me. That is me. So the reality is, honestly, A.L.I.C.E is us.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Now, Lindsay, I'm going to shift over to you. I mentioned in the introduction how supporting A.L.I.C.E can help bring up the whole community. Can you tell us a little bit more about the benefits of supporting the A.L.I.C.E population?
Sure, that's a great question. As I'm guessing many of you might be wondering, what in the world is a health foundation doing up here with these ladies who know what they're doing in this space? I'm with Kansas Health Foundation, and we have the audacious goal of wanting to lead the nation in health. And we look at that really as much broader than traditional healthcare, though we know that's extremely important. What we're really thinking about right now are what are those factors underneath that housing, access to transportation, childcare, all income, that we know impact people's long-term health outcomes. And so we're really trying to champion the message right now. We use America's Health Rankings. It's used nationally, and no state has fallen further in those rankings than Kansas. So we actually used to be in the top 10. We were number 8 in 1991, and we've fallen as far as number 31, so lower than middle of the pack. We're 28th right now, and so we're really trying to get the word out that we think this is really everybody's business. That's why a healthcare foundation is in this space. And we know that your income or for your financial situation, like probably preaching to the choir here, has direct ties to health outcomes later on. So your ability to access medical care when you need it, preventatively, instead of having to use those emergency services, your ability to live in housing without lead, your ability to give your kids a good start. These are things that tie later on to your health outcomes. And then you guys probably get this as employers, you know this, healthier workforce means less absenteeism, less turnover, greater productivity. And then we're unveiling some research at the Health Foundation. We've been looking at a couple of decades worth of research, actually, countries all across the world. And it probably comes as no surprise, but countries with greater population health have higher GDP, they have greater foreign investments, and they rank much higher in competitive advantages for businesses. And so we think this is really something that if we're gonna make progress on leading the nation in health, we cannot just keep making healthy Kansans healthier, though that's great, like give all the opportunities there. But we know that we're going to have to make progress on some of these challenges that those who are struggling most are facing.
So just a follow-up question to you, Lindsay. Is there anything currently being done to help A.L.I.C.E?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to let Sarah in a minute speak to some like on-the-ground program supports. And actually, United Way is one of our favorite partners. So our foundation invests in them heavily. We believe heavily in what they're doing. Also, we would just be remiss to not say we're doing work at the policy level. So Kansas Health Foundation invests in policy partners who are working at the state and federal level to lift up solutions from Kansans. And we'll have opportunities to get some solutions from you all, hopefully at the end of this. And we also are working on a blueprint specifically in upward mobility. So how do you kind of achieve that American dream? And what we hope to co-create in 2026 is a set of shared 8 policy priorities that are shared across bipartisan lines that we can advocate for.
That's amazing that the Health Foundation is working in the advocacy space. Now, Sarah, I'll turn it to you. Can you share a little bit about what United Way is doing to help support A.L.I.C.E?
One of the hardest parts about if you're in an A.L.I.C.E household and you're living paycheck to paycheck, one of the hardest parts about getting assistance is eligibility requirements. A lot of our eligibility requirements for most programs are set somewhere along the federal poverty line. I kept trying to say policy. Oh. They're set somewhere along the federal poverty level, which honestly leaves out a big chunk of the A.L.I.C.E population. At United Way, we have the 211 Resource Navigation Center, which anyone in the state can call. And they can call that number to get access to resources that will address whatever needs they might have, and hopefully help support in navigating some of those eligibility puzzle pieces, we'll say. We also have some programs that are designed specifically for addressing, like being accessible to the A.L.I.C.E population, such as our free tax filing services. It's free tax filing for anybody who makes low to moderate income so that folks can get what they need, get that tax obligation taken care of, and then hopefully you see folks paying down debt with that return, but sometimes we get really excited when we can see folks build some assets.
So we know that service providers such as the United Way and all of the other amazing nonprofits here in Wichita are working really hard to help the A.L.I.C.E population. From both of your perspectives, can you tell me about some things that the WIBA community could do to help?
Yeah, so we're a health foundation, so we're going to be giving out some grants, a large pool of grants in 2026. And typically we see those grants come from nonprofits, sometimes state agencies. We'd love to have the private sector in that space helping to craft solutions. So we'd love if you're thinking about creative ideas to impact this population. Maybe it's through your workforce, maybe it's like adjacent to your workforce. We'd love to hear your ideas and help fund those. We also are dabbling in the impact investing space, so taking 10% of our investment portfolio and instead of investing it overseas, we're investing it right here in Kansas. And so we actually think the private sector might have some great ideas for us in that space that could have benefits for the A.L.I.C.E population as well.
So I'm a pretty concrete thinker, and so I like having examples because we can use them as a good jumping off point for thinking about how we can be creative as a community. And one of the most exciting examples I found in all of the research and work I've been doing is a program developed in partnership between United Way of Citrus County in Florida and some local businesses. Together they developed I'm talking really fast, I'll slow down. Hopefully you can all understand me. I'm getting really excited, guys. They developed the Small Business 365 program, and all that is that businesses, they buy in, they donate $1 a day, or $365, to be a part of this program, and then the funds are used as a sort of A.L.I.C.E. fund. Folks in the community can call and get access to dollars to address that proverbial crisis that their family has encountered. You know, somebody got sick, couldn't go to work, now they can't make rent. That flat tire hit at just the wrong time. And so that's one of the programs I'm most excited about.
So Sarah, another follow-up question for you. What are some things that employers, maybe not just the WIBA community, but employers at large, can do to help support their A.L.I.C.E. workforce?
This is where I get really jazzed, guys. So those of us who are in service provision, we know that one of the factors in being effective in delivering your service is being where the people are. And where is A.L.I.C.E.? Well, they're at work. They're employed. There are workplaces all across the country that are starting to think creatively about things like work structure or benefits packages so that they can address the needs of A.L.I.C.E. in their workforce. Probably one of my favorite examples in this area, because you know my concrete examples. One of my favorite examples in this area is a home health care service program called Right at Home. When they're onboarding a new employee, they will spend a few extra minutes with them at the beginning of the process, not just to learn what shift that they need to work on, but also like what are some other factors that might influence their availability or their schedule. And then they build the work schedule with those things in mind. So if you've got to arrive maybe a little bit later because you've got school drop-off, or maybe you're helping to care for an aging family member and there's that one consistent appointment that nobody else can seem to cover. So they build that flexible schedule, and with that flexibility, they've reduced their costs or reduced their turnover rates, which have in turn reduced costs. And as they're working with clients, they just explain that work schedule. They order things out accordingly and make sure everyone's needs are met to the best of everyone's ability.
Lindsay, the final question is for you. What about from the Kansas Health Foundation's perspective? Is there anything that we can do right now?
Sure. We have kind of a fun opportunity open right now. We're calling it our Wish Well. You may have seen it. We actually launched it here in Wichita in June at Somewhere Fest. And so a music festival, I was kind of skeptical, like, are we going to make much? And we heard from almost 500 Kansans at that festival. In a minute, we'll show you a video, but just a variety of voices and lots of young people. And so we heard from a young man whose dad had a health issue, and then his dad lost his job, and so he was telling us his wishes for his dad and what it meant for his family. We heard from a single mother. We heard from somebody who would love to retire but couldn't afford to because of the costs in the world. So just some really powerful examples. And we're actually asking you all to participate today too. So we have this open wish well that you can submit online, and we're asking people to think about someone they know who's struggling to make ends meet. And so when I thought about this, I thought about a family member who had a lot of medical debt and the toll that took on their family. And then we asked people to say, what are their ideas for supports you wish were in place for that person right now? And it can be just broad and general, or if you have some great specific idea, we want to hear it. We're going to be using it to shape all of our initiatives. So I'm going to see if this video will play so you'll get a flavor of what that was about.
My wish is for everybody to be able to join a supportive and sustainable community.
My wish is that everybody could have access to childcare so they don't have to worry about their children.
My wish would just be for affordable higher education.
I just wish that there was more access to quality, healthy foods in our community.
More startup capital for new businesses.
Anyone who's struggling in the community to have access to jobs, access to food.
For people to have financial education, affordable health care and housing.
More affordable health care.
Health care that they can afford.
Access to health care and a livable income while they're struggling.
Definitely secure income.
World peace. For everyone to find peace and joy in their lives.
So So there you can kind of get a taste of what people, I always like the world peace. We had one category where we counted like good vibes. There were some good vibes. But so some of those, you may have ideas for those right now. So you can find this on our website later, or you can do it now. And I'm serious, we'd love to hear ideas, particularly from the business community. It's a community we don't always get to access and hear from, and we know you have very creative ideas and just a history of ingenuity. So thank you so much for participating.
Can you talk a little bit more about the entry level? You were talking about the poverty level or whatnot. What are those kind of standards that are kind of hard?
So this is a fun question, and I'm going to work really hard not to fall down a nerdy rabbit hole. So the federal poverty level is kind of the traditional metric of poverty in this country, right? Most of us are familiar with it in some way, shape, or form. It was originally developed in, I believe, 1969. It was like the late 60s, mid 60s. Oh, 1960. There we go. See, VP to the rescue. So it was originally developed in the 60s, and it is, to be really straightforward, primarily a food budget. It's, if you were to, the theory was that a social worker within the federal government was thinking through like, all right, if I'm buying only the things it takes to survive, the last thing I'm getting rid of is food. So if I spend 30% of my income on food and I'm buying at this very low level, then this is my income, and that's how we get the federal poverty level. And that's kind of the traditional measure. There's also another metric that is often used in determining eligibility for housing assistance. Is called it's 50% of the AMI. And so AMI is area median income. And so they take the income for the area, find the median, knock that in half, and that's your measure. Problem is that's an income metric, not an affordability metric. So that doesn't really get the whole breadth of what we need either. And then in a more like policy analysis area, more academic area, we also have the supplemental poverty measure, which does include more than food, so we kind of correct for the federal poverty level, but it still doesn't necessarily incorporate everything that's needed, nor does it give us a full picture of the actual costs. So those are kind of the three big metrics of that we use to measure poverty, and what I think are their shortfalls.
Have you seen an increase in A.L.I.C.E since, I would probably say since COVID, or since we've seen a lot of economic events that continue to happen?
Yes, certainly. There are certain segments of the population or the A.L.I.C.E population that are growing faster than others, but absolutely we've seen a growth. In Kansas, I want to say it was a pretty modest growth, and some of that was folks falling off of the federal poverty level line. So as restrictions were put into place for the federal poverty level qualification, we had more folks falling into A.L.I.C.E, but not anybody in A.L.I.C.E moving up out of A.L.I.C.E. If I remember correctly, for the past 10 years, we've had a roughly, 7% increase. Say that again?
That sounds right.
Okay, roughly 7% increase in A.L.I.C.E over the past decade.
Are you working with any private schools, church-related schools or non-parochial schools, and reaching out to them and letting them know about this and an opportunity for fundraising, maybe at those levels, anything that, and then also, within Central County schools, who's your interface there? You have someone, I hope, designated that you're talking to there?
We do. We've got a couple of folks across the organization that are working closely with different pieces of our community. What I love about what you pointed out, though, is are we working with some of these folks yet? And I'll be honest with you, and I'll say not as much as I would like to, because A.L.I.C.E is, to me, it's not a new concept. We've been talking about this for a minute, but right now we're just trying to make sure folks know that it's there. And if you're ready to talk to us, we're ready to chat. So whoever's out there, call me.
I could also add,
Oh yeah, please do.
We're seeing some of those folks you're talking about help us shape new creative ideas. So we actually have a private sector partner here in town who is experimenting with the idea of paying for a social worker to be on staff to help with their frontline workforce, and so helping them with some things like housing, but also just basic professionalism and showing up and financial literacy help that they need. And really some of the partners who've helped, it's a business doing it, right, and paying for it, and they're seeing increased productivity in their workers, but it's some of those partners on the nonprofit side who've tried this and made great gains. I know HopeNet's in the room somewhere, Jo Lynn, she has a lot of experience on this side of things, that they've made great gains and say we can transfer some of this knowledge into other settings too.
Abel?
I think you mentioned earlier that to meet the needs of a survival budget for A.L.I.C.E, it costs about $75,000. Is that correct?
For a family of 4.
For a family of 4. So for a family of 4 to thrive, what's that number?
Close to 90,000, I believe.
$90,000 a year for a family of 4 to thrive. So now you're able to pay for things like school supplies, emergency fund,
clothes.
You're saving for retirement.
Savings and retirement. Okay.
I'm really interested. I appreciated the slide that you had up earlier saying exactly what might be included in that basic budget. I'm curious if you have any resources somewhere that puts numerical figures with that so that somebody in need could be educated if they're paying too much for something and maybe need to adjust somewhere.
Yeah, so if you scan that QR code or go to that website, it's going to take you to the 2025 A.L.I.C.E reports. There's also going to be county-specific reports that we have kind of shown on this slide that will break it down specifically for Sedgwick County or whatever county you're looking for.
I'm also just going to add to that. I think it can help those who are in need. I also find at the Health Foundation, it's really eye-opening for those who don't experience that need. Like I have 3 kids and I know what it takes to spend on food, and then you look at the comparative number and it's like, whoa. Or you'll often find, if you're in the higher income bracket, you'll see what you pay on housing versus the percentage and cost of what somebody, and it's pretty eye-opening. So I think it's useful all across.
Any other questions before we, go ahead.
In the nonprofit sector, have there been any gains made as far as addressing siloing of resources?
We're working on it. I know that there is a lot of work being done by, honestly, nonprofits across the community that are serving as convening points. I'll tell you, at United Way, we're doing our best to do that in a few different areas. We've got some folks that are helping to pull together the Wichita-Sedgwick County Coalition to End Homelessness. One of the programs that I help support is the Bank on ICT Coalition, and that one we're trying to pull together, yes, financial resources and making those accessible, but also resources that might come tangential to that. So we are trying to, I know, and we're just one organization, right? So I know that we are working on it, but there's always room for improvement because there is such a siloing effect. You know, you get so used to doing your work and doing the hard thing that you forget to call somebody.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Double question.
Just kind of looking ahead, do we have as a community any kind of task force working at all on the issue of how AI is going to impact this income bracket?
That's a great question.
So she was asking about if we have any kind of task force in the community thinking about AI and how it will impact this particular segment of the population. And that is a great question. I know there's some research that my team and I are doing on how we can leverage AI to help support. But I think some of us may be aware there was a large tech company in Oklahoma City that recently let go of 500 workers because they were replaced by AI. And so I think that is something we need to have on our radar. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say that what we're seeing is people are looking at the data. So we have partners in workforce, for example, like the South Central Workforce Alliance, who are really looking at the data of how AI is starting to impact or projections of how it could. And I think we need to get to that level of how we can both utilize it for good and be aware to pivot and adapt.
Any other final questions before we wrap for? Okay, well, thank you for your time.